and it was in the Polish camps. Auschwitz was the best known one, of course, where the whole idea of the final solution came about, where how you could eliminate millions of Jews, and that was one way they found to do it. But that took place in those camps, and it was not in Belsen. Belsen was not an extermination camp as such. So in 1944 and into 1945, as you possibly know, the Germans attacked Russia and got quite a long way east. They got not far from Moscow, actually, until they were actually halted. They ran out of steam, ran out of everything. Complete miscalculation on the part of the German, or Hitler personally, I think. And finally, in the end, the Russian armies recovered, rearmed, and gradually drove the Germans back west. And as they approached through Russia, first of all, and then into Poland, apparently an order was given from Berlin that none of these big labor camps, concentration camps, slave labor camps, the staff or the prisoners was not to be allowed to fall into Russian hands. I don't know why that decision was done, but apparently that was done. And the order was given to evacuate all hundreds of thousands of prisoners. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, probably 500,000 or more. And they all had to leave, and they all had to be transferred to within Germany itself, and preferably to somewhere in the west of Germany, so as not to be captured and overtaken by the Russians. And that started what came to be known as death marches, because there was no transport, so all the prisoners and the guards had to march hundreds and hundreds of miles from Russia and Poland across to the west. And all this happened in the winter of 44-45, where of course it gets very cold indeed. The net result of that is that, of course there are no accurate figures, but it is estimated that well over 50% of the people died en route and never made it. And those that did, of course, were in a terrible poor state after this very long march through this very cold weather without proper clothing. Of this drive to go west to get away from the Russians, many of the camps, the commanders of those camps that are being evacuated, were told to go to Belsen. And from January onwards in 1945, loads of trucks or people on foot that arrived at Belsen concentration camp to be housed there. And that went on through January, February, March, and thousands of people were being poured into this 10,000 maximum sort of concentration camp with no provision or thought or organization to handle such a thing at all. The result was that by April 1945, which we were coming up to, it was, according to the camp commandant's figures, 60,000 people had come in, at least. He wasn't even sure how many. 60,000 people had come in. As I said, there was no food for those people. By that time, the water system had broken down because it worked by electricity, which had stopped working. The food had run out. And at that time, the death rate of the people that were pushed into that camp was running at over 500 people a day. When we got there, the situation was that of the 60,000 plus, or whatever it was, at least 10,000 were dead bodies there. And as I say, they were dying at a rate of 500 a day. So that was the sort of situation up to the time of the liberation, which was the 15th of April, 45. Now, to come to me, how do I fit into this? I was in the British Army shortly after the Normandy landing, and right the way through France, Holland, into Germany. I was a major in the in one of the corps headquarters of the Second British Army. General Montgomery was the general, and in the army there was 3 corps, that they called, each with about 250,000 men, and the corps commander is a general, and around him he has always a staff of officers, each of whom specializes in one or other of the branches of the service that in his command. Those specialist officers give advice on any plans that are being drawn up as to what their particular arm can do or can't do, and then when a plan is decided, they liaise between the corps headquarters and the different regiments within the corps to the commanders of those regiments to explain exactly what's going on or what's wanted, and vice versa. The regiments liaise back through the staff officers to the corps headquarters to tell them what they can do and what they can't do and all that. So I was one of those, and my speciality actually was anti-aircraft artillery, because up to that time the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was very active, and the British Army had to have a lot of anti-aircraft facility to protect themselves, and we had, and I was doing that job. On the 12th of April, which is 3 days before the Liberation Day, a German colonel with a white flag and a motorcycle and a sidecar was ushered through our front line to our corps headquarters. By that time, we were in a place called Vincennes, which is east of Hanover. And he'd come under the white flag on the instruction of his corps commander with a proposition for our corps commander. So the proposition worked out like this. He said that we were approaching a civilian detention center, or whatever words he used, I can't remember, which had a large number of civilian prisoners in it, and that typhus had broken out in this camp, and that his commander thought that it might be a very sensible idea to draw a truce area around this camp, and because if the fighting went through it, and I must say the war was very active at this time. The Germans were they were retreating, but they were certainly not running away. That if fighting had broken out around and in this camp, no doubt hundreds and thousands of the inmates would disappear and spread themselves out around the country and carry the typhus with them, which would be a bad thing for the German army, and bad thing for the British army, and bad thing all round. And he said that the suggestion was that a truce area would be declared around the camp,